God Valley's epic finale is finally here, and we're seeing the aftermath of Rock's, Roger, and Garp's big clash. Garp's about to accidentally create the Revolutionary Army, Shanks is finally with the Roger pirates, and Harald is dooming Elbaf to despair. And on top of that, we even get some crazy new hints about Nika and Luffy's potential path after Elbaf. And I gotta say, this is not how I expected the God Valley incident to come to a close at all, but we gotta talk about everything here because there is just so much stuff going on here. And to kick things off, I'll be honest with you, the most surprising part of God Valley's big climax, at least for me, was the way that Xebec actually died. I was very confident that the double whammy attack of Garp's infinitum explosion and Roger's crazy great fire god ace attack was pretty much all she wrote. They gave it every last drop of power they had, and I thought, sick, that is the epic end of Rocksteady Xebec. But nope, Xebec actually survived even that, which really just goes to show how crazily strong that guy really was, especially with that entire Domi Reversi buff. But something else that I noticed was that he didn't have his fangs or anything else anymore in this panel. He even talks about how the curse has now been lifted, and the way he was talking to them, even though they couldn't hear him, had me absolutely in tears. Like, this entire chapter was just crazy emotional overall. It was like genuinely sad, but at the same time very wholesome to see just how concerned he was for, I guess, his friends at this point, Roger and Garp. I mean, he knew at what kind of risk he put them, and they really tried to do their best, even risk exposing them completely, and he was very grateful and happy for that. All he really wanted for them was to escape safely, since there was more to both of their stories. And then he even gave them this big thank you for stopping his rampage. And I'm very happy to admit that I absolutely did, yes, shed a tear when I was reading this. Actually, twice. It's just great writing, and I feel like these moments sometimes go a little bit unappreciated. Also, it was really nice to actually get some clarity now on how Roger and Garp actually escaped, because turns out that both of my boys came in clutch here. Shout out to Rayleigh and Scopper for getting the real heroes of God Valley out of there before the island finally sank into the ocean. And overall, the entire first section of chapter 1166 is written very beautifully. We know that Xebec had literally one goal on God Valley. He wanted to make sure that Eris and Teach escaped safe and soundly, and once that was done, he was really pretty much fine with whatever happened. Now, that being said, I'm pretty certain he wasn't exactly banking on going out as a demon shell of himself, but hey, nonetheless, mission accomplished, man. I mean, that's fatherhood. It's really putting everything on the line to save your kid and your family. And Xebec, watching you fall is a moment that I will quite literally never forget, because I think that you were absolutely robbed of an earnest and good death in this chapter. Oda, man, like, this one was actually kind of disgusting of you. He gave his mind, body, and soul for his family, and then you leave him to Garling? Garling gets the final blow? A while ago, I really was hyped for Garling, right? Shanks has a super powerful, now Gorosei level dad. He's the champion of God Valley. He was framed to be this like crazy cool, powerful, top tier villain. And I mean, yeah, I guess he still is all that, but in a much, well, sneakier way. Like, come on, the dude's a real snake, and not in the cool way I normally talk about on this channel, no. He's not a cool snake like the Hellflame Serpent or Jormungandr. This dude is a truly evil piece of garbage. He steals, he lies, does other things that we don't talk about YouTube, looking at Shanks and Shamrock, and he casually offs people who aren't able to fight back. What's up with this, like, peak scumbagness at this point? I mean, I get it, you know, narratively, Garling had some serious beef with Xebec after the Davy clan's greatest warrior absolutely dismantled Garling during this flashback, but I just really wasn't prepared for Oda to give Garling that finishing blow anyways. And they're even aura farming in this panel on top of everything. All three of them have no business looking this cool. And it's actually really sad. Like, I don't know, it really just left me a little bit empty inside, but to fill that hole, I did find some subtle details with this interaction that left a somewhat better taste in my mouth, because the Holy Knights actually were not defeated on God Valley. And I really need to emphasize that, because obviously Agenda Piece is really making them out to be absolute weaklings who got beat. They did lose fights, like a lot, that's undeniable, but they did come out basically completely unscathed. I mean, Garling, Maffey, and Summers went toe-to-toe with some of the strongest and most broken beings and characters in the series and walked out of it very casually here, which actually did a pretty good job making me a lot more terrified for the endgame of the series in Elbaf, because I straight up still don't know what will overcome this immortality if none of these crazy legends had an answer to this before. I'm not sure if you'd agree with this, but to me the end of the Elbaf arc is almost guaranteed now to end in some real tragedy. Like, seriously, with Emu there and the other Holy Knights destroying the entire island, I just can't see a world where the current remaining characters on the good side can actually get anything done of significance here. Unless Oda kind of lazily gives Gear 5 some amazing, Deus Ex Machina power that Luffy didn't even need to train for, and or Loki is literally just that broken. That would be cool. At best, the battle between the Straw Hats and the Holy Knights will end up in a draw somehow, I think. But it also kind of makes you wonder, can Shanks? Like, we do know that he spent time up in Merijoa and has the Holy Knight's mark apparently on his triceps, so I think that maybe, just maybe, the red hair pirates out of all people might actually be pretty essential to defeating the Holy Knights at some point in the story. Maybe in Elbaf, maybe a little bit later. Or I don't know, maybe Shanks actually taught Scopper what it is that needs to be done to overcome this. That'd be a pretty helpful and cool detail that makes this flashback come full circle. And I mean, I can't tell you just how excited I am to see what direction Oda takes this all in, like once we actually get back to Luffy and co. Obviously, there's still a good chance that I really like that there might be a little training arc with Copacabana. We still had these like kind of unresolved time shenanigans, where it was like, oh, don't spend too much time on Elbaf, time is weird here. Maybe there's some sort of time chamber area where Luffy can train with Scopper. I would be down for that. Maybe the Holy Knights actually leave successfully and then they actually manage to save the island and train afterwards. Obviously, there's the entire thing that Luffy's Nika powers might be, the kind of opposite thing to Emu that's been set up for a long time, that, either Luffy has a power of his own that can kind of counteract Emu's abilities, or he has the ability to kind of override it in some other way. But as I just said, I wouldn't want it to be just I suddenly just can do this. It should still be something that Luffy needs to work for. And there are some other things, obviously, like for example, there could always be someone coming from the outside. Maybe Big Mom, maybe Shanks, I don't know. Big Mom would be a wild one. Still something I could absolutely see happening though, knowing Oda. Or it could also just be that it might be something related to Brook and Gunko specifically, right? Like we have seen that before Gunko got taken over, she suddenly had these suppressed memories coming back. So that could be something. We know that Brook has these soul-touching powers, and if the Abyss is actually interacting with the soul in some way, that could be a way. And to this day, I'm also kind of curious if all these like demon and devil-related themes that all the Straw Hats have going on is actually more than just a thematic kind of like toy that Oda has been using, with Luffy being the Sun Wukong monkey demon and the King of Hell with Zoro and Ifrit and Diablo Jamble with Sanji, and as you know, all the Straw Hats have this like demon devil, like supernatural theme. It could be really cool if that's actually what they need to tap into in order to, counter the Abyss. But I do wonder, is Oda gonna actually use Elbaf here to teach the Straw Hats a real lesson? Is it kind of gonna be the Saba Odi of the New World where they get like a real defeat? Something that I actually thought might happen in Egghead Island, but then didn't end up happening, even though Egghead had so many parallels to Saba Odi. So maybe it is just gonna be Elbaf, where the Straw Hats get defeated or scattered or something big and tragic happens. Because on the other hand, would you be satisfied if Elbaf ends in Luffy and co defeating Emu and the Holy Knights? It would be kind of weird, at least, without any major training or any other, big event that justifies that power-up. Hey, hello, Manu, it's me, your good friend, the Fleet Admiral. It's been a while, and man, God Valley sure is nice this time of year, am I right? Hasn't there been this, huge battle going on right now where you are? Nah, the Celestial Dragons here are just on vacation. Someone's trying to become the champion of God Valley, but what I really want to do is conquer Stardew Valley. And even though I am a pro gamer, of course certified, to get over some unfortunate hurdles I'm struggling with, I'm actually using Want. I see you're intrigued, Manu. Let me explain. Want lets me customize any game I play to fit my own goals. This desktop app gives tons of assistance and guidance for over 3,000 500 single-player PC games like Hollow Knight, Silksong, Baldur's Gate 3, and of course, Peak! And it's super easy to use. You can just toggle different benefits with Alt W, and it opens up a super simple in-game overlay. And with that, I can run super fast, destroy trees in one chop, and even stop time itself. Now, one of my favorite features is the interactive maps. They point out where everyone's homes, resources, and key locations are for me. It's kind of like observation hockey, but without the effort. Really, there's no barrier to having some fun, even with a busy schedule like mine. Actually, my nephew has also been using it for that new game he's playing, Mega Bonk, it's called. Wait, you have a nephew? Of course! His name is Helmeppo. We both use one to play all of our favorite single-player games on our terms. No more pesky grinding, just maximum fun. And now you can try Want too by using, this guy's link, our link, want.gg/Ohara, which is on screen here, and you can also click the pinned comment or link in the description. Mano, with that, enough chit chat. It's been a while. I'm tired of you already. I'm gonna play some games, and you do whatever you've been doing. Also, another thing that I noticed with the Holy Knights, by the way, is that Oda specifically chose Maffy, Summers, and Garling to be around for the execution of Xebec. And obviously, this could, for all we know, just be Oda, picking some random fighters for this moment. But I don't know, I kind of think there might be more to that specific choice too. Obviously, Maffy and Summers are clearly framed as powerful. One quite literally shoots freaking laser beams from her mouth. Meanwhile, Summers is clearly a very high-ranking member based on his uniform and awards during the modern-day Elbaf segments. So could this moment here be a subtle hint at the hierarchy of the Holy Knights? Are Summers and Maffy the top two fighters after Garling and presumably Shamrock in the modern era? At first I kinda assumed it would be Gunko and Summers, but maybe it's Maffy's supremacy all the way up there and we might see her in the current storyline. And after seeing her in action, I do think it could make a lot of sense too. Also, this might just be me, but I feel like they're also drawn in a way that somewhat reminds me of Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji, or I guess more accurately for this era, Roger, Rayleigh, and Scopper. Like Oda framing this elite squad as a trio of sorts? Am I imagining that? And it also kind of makes me wonder, where did all the other Holy Knights go at this point? I remember, Gunko obviously got all this hype when it was revealed that she was on God Valley, and after that, she never appeared again, I think. Like, maybe my biases are showing a little bit here, but I really was expecting, or at least hoping, to get some extra Holy Knight lore here during this flashback, but hey, I'll gladly take what we've gotten. It's clear at this point, though, that their immortality and regeneration is what really puts them on a different level, even if they themselves aren't that impressive fighting-wise yet, at least. But I also think that maybe the single most important detail of the first chunk between Xebec and the Holy Knights is how Xebec goes out here. Because as far as I can see, it really looks like he might be the single first member of the D-Clan we have seen die without a clear smile on his face. And actually, to be completely fair here, I guess we didn't actually see Clover go out with a smile either, but that's because unfortunately we never saw the moment that he actually passed. He actually kicked the bucket off screen in a massive Buster Call, and no, the Spandine shot here actually did not kill him. I often misremember that one too. He kind of kept chatting for several chapters after this, which does feel a little bit anticlimactic, and I do think I convinced myself that was the case for it to make a lot more sense, but yeah, reread it, it's actually kind of a little bit weird. He dies probably in the explosion. Regardless, different flashback, the D-Clan smiling in the face of death is something that I felt Oda has made very clear throughout the story, and the fact that Xebec specifically didn't die with the big old grin kind of leaves me questioning some important stuff here. So I was actually spending some time thinking about it and what could explain this, and I cooked up an idea that might be a good explanation, but I'm not 100% certain. However, I think it does have something going for it, and I want to take us back here to Vegapunk's message real quick, specifically in chapters 1117 and 18. In these chapters, Vegapunk starts to say something about the D-Clan, alluding to something or someone amongst them being, well, something, and then it just kind of cuts out in between. And a long floating theory in the community has been that Vegapunk was gonna say that there was actually an imposter or a traitor amongst the D-Clan, and I do think that that could still be the case, but what if it's actually true that the Davy clan are not real members of the same D-Clan as everyone else? Remember, recently we found out that Davy D. Jones is not Joy Boy, despite the D-Clan being tied to families and people associated with Joy Boy as far as we can tell. Why is that? Well, I do think that there's definitely a world where Oda is setting up two different types of D-clans, and this could even be what the Harley text from chapter 1138 was also hinting at. It also talks about the people of the moon and the people of the half moon and the demons that get raised in the second world, probably by the forest gods. So what if they're actually two branches of the same D-clan? I think that could explain why all these positive, good, happy figures are associated with Joy Boy's legacy. You know, people like Roger, Ace, Rouge, they all died with that smile on their face. Meanwhile, Rox, a member of the other branch, dies with a frown on his face. I'm not too certain about this, but it's kind of what my mind immediately went to, if that makes sense. So then again, maybe there's some other explanations. Maybe being Domi reversied and having your soul or very being tainted by Emu and the Abyss just took away that secret power that the D-clan maybe has. Another idea could be that, well, maybe Rox doesn't die here and that's why we don't see him smile, and it's Oda's very sneaky way of being like, hey, this is not the end of Xebec. Maybe he's already passed on his soul to teach or something. It seems to be pretty clear in this chapter that, you know, Xebec is dead, but I will say that could be Oda being very sneaky. Not sure. I mean, imagine how crazy it would be that Rox actually is alive in some capacity, and that was the foreshadowing for that. That would be absolutely crazy. I mean, otherwise, it makes the scene very, very weird. You'd kind of also expect that with him kind of having fulfilled everything that he wanted to do on God Valley, he would be satisfied, right? Like, we do see him definitely trying to stay alive and then kind of being like, okay, well, I guess I was too lucky even still breathing right now. He sees Garland coming up. He's like, okay, accepting his fate pretty much. That would be like, it feels like a moment where one of the D-clan members would just be like, well, I saved my family, I had a great life, that's it. Or could this be a sign that Rox just died nonetheless with such heavy regrets, not being able to recruit Harald, which we'll obviously get to in just a moment, not being able to take down Emu, and I still think that Rox knew so much more about the true history of the world that we just don't know yet either, that maybe he died with such a crazy amount of regrets that he just could not smile. Like, I think it's a fair question to ask, if Luffy would die right now, would he still die with a smile on his face? I mean, he did that on, you know, Loketown, obviously, where he was about to get executed, but I don't know, maybe if you actually feel like you failed in your life's mission and failed your dream, maybe that kind of overrides the entire D-clan smiling thing. If you have any ideas, please let me know, but I think this scene is much more interesting than it looks on the surface. Anyhow, so I've been talking about the entire beginning of chapter 1166 so far with Xebec and the Holy Knights, but before we can actually move on from this and get into the other crazy stuff with Dragon and Garp and Harald, I do need to talk about something not specifically in the chapter that also came out with the cover of Shonen Jump where this chapter released. Because we finally have gotten Xebec's official colors, and well, I really wasn't prepared for it, but I probably should have been, because Oda, you crazy man, done it once again. I had expectations for Xebec's hair, and man, I was so close, yet so far off, because you might remember that I had some real expectations for what Xebec's hair was gonna be, and man, I was close, yet still so far away, because if you scroll back through my channel thumbnails, you may have noticed that I've had my channel artist kind of alternate between two color palettes for Xebec while we still were waiting for his official colors. Obviously, once we had like this stripe pattern, we did go for just black and white, because that seemed kind of safe, which also goes crazy in my opinion, not gonna lie. But before that, we also went with black and blue when we first got Rox revealed, since especially in the first 2 or 3 chapters, it was low-key being implied that he had ties to both, yes, Teach, but also Buggy. So, color me surprised when Oda went with a color combo I was so close to guessing. Pretty much the third option that I never went with, white and blue. Really close, I will say. Really close. A little bit annoyed that we didn't nail that. And I will say that despite it not being my preferred color scheme, the black and white still goes pretty hard, I think, but it also, of course, paves the way for the return of the Davy D Buggy theories. Now, in case quickly you're new to watching me, or are just new to the theory space in general, or missed this one particularly, let me quickly sum it up. In Xebec's first official panel that we got, half of his face looks exactly how Oda draws Teach, and the other half looks exactly how Oda draws Buggy. Now this of course immediately made the entire community explode because it was being implied, through this nearly one-to-one drawing that Teach and Buggy were secretly brothers or related. And then we get the reveal of Xebec's bounty poster, which is just the exact same pose that the current Buggy poster uses too, pretty much doubling down on this very connection. But then we learned about Itties and we saw Teach and Shanks and Shamrock all appear on God Valley, which pretty much kicked that theory out of the window for a good while because age-wise, Shanks and Buggy are the same age and Teach is 1 year older. In other words, Buggy also would have been alive during God Valley, and seeing as only Teach and Itties were together there, it seemed pretty much impossible for Teach and Buggy to both be Aerith and Xebec's kids. Since again, I feel like Buggy then should have also been there with them right there. But you know me, I could not let that one sit, so I dug into the timeline a lot deeper after I saw the color palette because man, do I really just want this Buggy and Xebec connection to be the case? There's definitely a world where Xebec wasn't a super loyal husband and hooked up with some other girl after marrying Itties, but I don't know, I don't think Oda's written him that way. He seems like this loving family man, and that would be kind of weird now, throwing that into his character. He doesn't exactly give off the strong Joseph Joestar energy, is what I'm trying to say. And then the next thing that I wondered was if maybe Buggy is his nephew. I mean, Itties and Teach were supposed to escape to Lulusia, which maybe means there was another branch of the Davy clan there. Maybe Buggy is just his nephew or a relative. That could work, but I kind of feel like Oda would do something much bigger with that if that were the case. And after pretty much bashing my head through a wall, I think I might have found something that could totally work. Very curious what you think. Because for this idea, the timeline makes sense, the connections make sense, and literally everything points to this option being the most likely, I think. And it's all thanks to a actually very forgettable member of the Rocks Pirates who makes an appearance in this very chapter, Miss Buckingham Stussy. Here's what I'm thinking. We do know that 39 years ago, Stussy was a founding member of MADS, a science group that discovered the lineage factor. It was formed by some great scientists like Vegapunk, Queen, Judge, some not so great scientists like Caesar Clown and Stussy, and we do know that pretty much every single member of this group was working with or on the lineage factor stuff based on their appearances in the main line of the story. I mean, Judge is literally making a clone army, Caesar is genetically modifying kids and playing with devil fruits, and good old Vegapunk created the Seraphim and artificial devil fruits based on these bloodline elements as well. And the leading theory is that Stussy actually created her son, Weevil, as a bad clone based on Whitebeard's DNA. But I don't know, they were pretty close as we see in this flashback too, so they might have actually done the no pants dance and made Weevil the old-fashioned way. Who knows? Regardless, how does that now tie into Buggy and Xebec? Well, we do know for certain that Stussy is closely attached to the lineage factor experiments because Matt's first successful clone was a clone of Stussy. That's the very same Stussy we see infiltrate ZP0, and she's a sick vampire lady during the Egghead Island arc. And I'd say based on her age, we can determine that the first successful clone that Mads created was 36 years ago in the story, 2 years after the God Valley incident. But that also leaves 3 full years of experimenting and testing cloning tech before a quote successful clone was ever produced. As you probably know, scientists don't just one and done this stuff. It takes time. We even see this with Vegapunk, who takes a while to actually create the perfect clone devil fruit. And he even sees Momo's devil fruit as a failed experiment because the color isn't right. And I think you kind of get what I'm getting at here, because seeing that Xebec was the most powerful pirate in the world during that time period, and Stussy had direct access to him, I think that Buggy could be a failed clone of Rox D. Xebec. Davy D. Xebec. But Manu, Buggy is still alive and kicking. That is a success, right? Wrong, because there is a very specific line from the mad scientist that has stuck with me ever since the Egghead Island arc. Again, what I just mentioned, Vegapunk himself explains to us what a failure is in his own eyes. In chapter 1067, we get the reveal that Vegapunk considered this devil fruit from Momo a failure because even though it's pretty much a perfect recreation of Kaido's dragon, dragon fruit, he did get the color wrong. It was supposed to be blue, it turned out pink, and the man nearly cracked his apple skull thing in half, bashing it on the ground in embarrassment. You know, kind of like how my parents reacted when they found out I'm gonna quit my job and become a One Piece YouTuber. So, with all of that cleared up, let's look at Buggy and Xebec. They are so close in looks, but his hair is obviously a little bit off. Buggy's hair is not blue and white, it's just blue. And by Vegapunk standards, that's a failure. Plus, of course, Buggy has his weird red nose that has never been explained, but we know is his real nose. So that would probably just kind of add to the entire failure idea. And Buggy would have been born the same year that Mads got together too, so the Davy D Buggy theory, I think, very much lives on here. And I want you to really please just think about why that would be so awesome for the story. Let me explain to you why I really want this to be the case. We've known for a long time now that secretly Buggy is Oda's favorite character. He was this like very insignificantly feeling villain at the beginning of the story who then turned out to be on the same crew as Shanks, which turned out to be the crew of the Pirate King. And Buggy has of course been constantly failing upwards in the entire story, becoming a warlord, becoming a Yonko. I am very confident at this point that in some shape, way, or form, Buggy is gonna become Pirate King. Whether he's gonna claim the One Piece first and then Luffy comes in, or whether Big News Morgan just makes that up again because he sees Buggy on Laugh Tale first, something is gonna happen and Oda is gonna have a panel where Buggy is declared king of the pirates before Luffy is. Or maybe after Luffy is. I don't know. Like, Buggy has a major role to play in the story, and I think it's a little bit more than just comic relief. I think we've all always suspected that Buggy might have some special lineage, especially after we got all the Figaland Garling stuff with Shanks and Shanks' twins and Shanks' Celestial Dragon heritage. Now think about the possibility that Buggy is a clone of Rocks. First of all, it would make sense that, you know, Roger would take Buggy in because, you know, seeing that he owed Rocks quite a lot and that they were really close, that would just make sense that he'd take this failed experiment in himself. Maybe Roger also at some point realized that there was something special about Rocks' lineage and body, and that's why he also wanted maybe Buggy to be there. And even actually that, if Blackbeard's body is special, can you think about the idea that Buggy might eat a second devil fruit? Actually, this might just be a whole video on its own, but can you imagine that whatever allows Blackbeard to eat multiple devil fruits, Buggy just happens to have it too because he's a clone of Xebec and Buggy eats a second devil fruit? How insane that would be. And just like Xebec, he's of course been kind of passively accumulating these very powerful pirates to his side with Mihawk and Crocodile, and he might get even more people like maybe Doflamingo and stuff. I don't know, I think it makes a lot of sense, and I think that would just make it so interesting because it could open up the potential for Buggy to actually stop being just a joke character and actually end up becoming powerful, even if he probably doesn't know about it. Now, of course, we still don't know how Roger actually found Buggy, but, you know, if he had maybe connections to Mads through Vegapunk or something, or even through Stussy, that could kind of work out. And again, maybe, you know, he is with Vegapunk right now, Roger meets Vegapunk or meets Mads, and then he's like, hey, this is a failed experiment of Rocks. Before you throw him overboard, we'll take him. Yes, please. Right? Kind of like that. I don't know. I love that idea, but maybe that's just me being me here. All right, I think I've spent more than enough time now on the Buggy hair color stuff, but please don't get mad at me. It's just enough to fit it into this video, especially since it came out in the context of this chapter, but I felt like not quite enough yet for its own theory. Unless you want to see a Buggy second devil fruit theory, let me know. But yeah, thanks for entertaining me for a little bit. Back now properly to chapter 1166, because while I'm done talking about Xebec for now, there's a certain Xebec fanboy that returned after God Valley wrapped up that really crushed my heart, and I want to talk about him for a second, since his big arc is about to be revealed in the main timeline, and while he's also the narrator of this whole flashback, I think, which is Loki, my boy. Loki time, baby. And when I say that I'm a little bit confused, something that's very unclear to me but could change how I view this entire flashback is how the God Valley incident actually was described and told by Loki. Because I gotta be honest, from everything we've seen, I have no idea if Loki knows what actually went down there. Because after we cut back to Loki, he just seems super sad, and we know that he's still a kid. I mean, as a teenager, he still thinks that Harald killed Rox, and so I'm kind of thinking that for the sake of clarity, Oda showed us God Valley, but maybe Loki didn't share that with Luffy and the company, or maybe Scopper interjected and covered that part, or maybe Loki learned it later. We'll see if the Straw Hats then actually suddenly know the lore of Rox and God Valley once we return to the main storyline, but even if that's the case, what I'm really focused on is the fact that we see Loki reflecting on his conversation with Rox here, which by the way just out of nowhere dropped a total bombshell reveal about Loki's belief in Nika. Loki apparently thought that Xebec was Nika, but of course Rox himself wasn't about that. You see, in his own eyes, Xebec was not a god that would destroy the world. Actually, a comment I also want to circle back to in just a moment, but Xebec just saw himself as a pirate who would conquer the world, become its king, so that he could change the world for the better. Which I think makes sense and lines up pretty nicely with all the interactions we get between him and Emu. Xebec, by birthright, thought that he should become king, and he formed an elite squad to take him to the peak of the world. He just, well, somehow wasn't strong enough. Now, the reason I really found this interaction so interesting, though, was because it's really the first time that we've seen Xebec acknowledge Nika himself, not Joy Boy, not Davy Jones, Nika. And I mean, it kind of makes sense. He clearly knows about the true history of the world, even the first world, and wanted to slay Emu of all things. Not to mention he camped out on Elbaf a whole bunch, so of course Xebec would know about the legendary sun gods. I've been pretty much theorizing that ever since we first saw Xebec make landfall on the land of the giants, but I didn't expect him to view Nika as a destroyer, because that's like a major detail in my opinion. I've theorized that Davy D. Jones could have been Nika before, and I think it's pretty safe that this idea is going out the window with this, because he wanted to be like Davy and clearly had no idea becoming Nika. And hey, sometimes you miss in the theory game, but sometimes you also hit, and I think that's what we're really playing for. Now, this entire Xebec comment really makes me wonder if the true story of Nika is just being a destroyer. It does line up really well with the Elbaf legends, as well as how the anime and certain parts of the manga do portray Luffy in the eyes of other people. He's not goofy, he's an absolute monster demon thing, and there is no question about it. So maybe the first world of One Piece just straight up did end in utter destruction, and Nika is a much more morally gray figure than we all thought. I mean, it'd be really cool to know that Luffy and Joy Boy actually had the power of a destructive god who liberated by force, chaotically, without care for anything. I don't know, I just think it would be so hyped to find out that Emu's got some good points somewhere hidden behind all the crazy evil stuff. That's kind of how Vegapunk described it after all, saying that he didn't know who was in the right or wrong, Joy Boy or Emu, and that maybe both were wrong, or maybe both had some good points. I don't know, it's just cool to me when a villain has good initial intentions but then gets corrupted along the way, which might have just been what actually happened. Maybe Emu and the government were actually the good guys when the Void Century ended, but then kind of got corrupted by power. And if Nika was actually just a super god destroyer in the past and Emu was trying to prevent that from happening, wouldn't that be a pretty cool and interesting twist? I think so, at least. Now, I will say something that this Loki and Xebec moment also make me think about was, surprisingly enough, 80s, and only because she had a super specific line about Xebec's plan and how he wasn't ready when he finally clashed with Emu and God Valley. Seeing as Loki now also viewed Xebec as Nika, and we know that Xebec had a plan revolving around specific devil fruits, this one to me all but confirms that Xebec was actually looking for the Nika fruit specifically. Maybe it wasn't meant for him, and that's the one he actually wanted Harald to have. But there's really no doubt in my mind now, he needed that fruit, Luffy's fruit, to actually counter and fight Emu. Which I will say does at least give me now some hope for Luffy in the future, what we talked about earlier. Maybe he really does have some crazy reverse gear or, you know, liberation sort of power hidden in the back pocket. And I actually have some stuff to talk about regarding that in my next video, so keep an eye out for that drop. But I really am left wondering how this interaction will actually play into Loki's full arc once we go back to Elbaf. Because honestly, it's kind of crazy to see him have what I assume is a very similar arc to Kaido of all people, people. And what I mean by that is that I've long been a big fan of the idea that Kaido thought that Xebec was a sort of Joy Boy-like figure, and that's why he followed him, up until God Valley failed, of course, and then Kaido went on to make his own crew, learning more about Joy Boy. And I think eventually we get some subtext that Kaido thought that he might become the next Joy Boy, and well, that didn't work either, so he got depressed, became an alcoholic, and waited until the real Joy Boy would show up and defeat him, or, you know, him helping create the next Zoro Joy Boy just by starting this big war. And I feel like Loki's kind of on that same sort of arc with Nika, but we are finding him during the phase of his life that he believes he is the next sun god, which, like Loki, the dude might just be. I mean, he's clearly got some crazy powers, it seems, and the beginning of the arc really hammers home, pun intended, how much the people of Elbaf fear Loki and Nika. And while I do think that Loki has actually more interesting connections to the Hellflame Serpent based on his creepy eyes and the fact that the giant in the mural who looks just like Loki has the same texture and, you know, pattern on his arm as the Hellflame Serpent, either way, Loki's role as a destroyer will almost certainly, I think, be a central point of the entire endgame. Don't forget that Loki even alluded to the fact that he wanted to become king of the world in chapter 1145. He had mentioned it sort of casually as he was, you know, eating up some yummy food and explaining things about the Holy Knights, saying that he'd already be, quote, king of the world if he had run into them during his travels. And to me, this probably means that there are two people right now gunning to be king of the world, and both of them have that goal because they share a hero in the form of Xebec. Loki, the Cursed Prince of Elbaf, and of course, Davy D. Teach, the son of Xebec. Both of them clearly idolize Rox, but only one of them has actually met him and heard his goal firsthand, and that's Loki. I mean, I think Teach at 2 years old, we can't really count that, right? And to me, this is a classic case of Oda setting up an insane encounter between Loki and Teach at some point in the story because they share the same will and hero, but only one of them actually knows what Xebec aimed to do. Of course, unless Eddie's actually raised Teach and told him something we aren't aware of and actually taught him everything that, you know, Xebec knew, which, you know, to be fair, totally could be the case. We don't know if they actually made it all the way to Lulusia or not after all. No idea where Kuma sent them. All I do know is that I am pumped to see one of these two become king, since I really do think they would be my front runners at the moment for becoming a potential king of the world after Imu is defeated, assuming there is a world king. That is, of course, which also not a given. After Imu's defeated, I kind of imagine that Blackbeard will be trying to steal that throne, but after he's eventually defeated, maybe Luffy entrusts it to Loki and Vivi. Or Shirahoshi? I don't know, some pair of people who will do right by that power, the two sovereigns who will meet again, as the, you know, Sea Kings say. But also more than likely, I kind of expect Loki will change his mind and outlook after the events of the Elbaf arc and set his sights on destroying the throne, seeing how pretty much every major tragedy in his life revolves around a monarchy. I mean, think about it. His mother, a corrupt queen hungering for power. His dad, misinformed and good-intentioned king of the country, who let that title lead him and his best friend to his death. Xebec, his big hero, died trying to claim that very throne, but Luffy, the man who will free him from his shackles, well, sure, he wants to be king of the pirates, but there is no throne there. In fact, Luffy thinks that being king is being the most free, and maybe Loki will let that message sink in as well. After all, Luffy's very clearly gonna kind of change his mind in some way, shape, or form. I would love nothing more than a really sick panel at some point in the story of Luffy shouting out to Loki to destroy that throne and then getting a sick shot of the prince crushing the empty throne under his foot or with his hammer, similar to the Sogeking flag shoot from Enies Lobby, right? Wouldn't that just be so, for lack of a better word, liberating? I think it kind of would be. And with that being said, I think it's now about time I shift into a different gear myself, because there was another huge moment in this chapter, because we finally got to see, during the end of God Valley, something I've been waiting for since I ever first read Water 7, which is Dragon and Garp's first canon interaction in the story ever. And I gotta say, this is my personal bias, but this was easily the highlight of the entire chapter for me. There's a certain personal deep level of hype that comes from finally seeing these two share a conversation on a page. And it's just making me so excited to see a possible reunion of them in the modern era, right? But before I get too carried away here, let me lock in on this for just a moment. It's of course a fairly brief section, only half a page, but it carries a really crazy amount of weight with it. This is the official moment that Dragon's destiny really kicks into action. He's actively telling Garp that he resents him and that he's gonna leave the Navy. And something that I never expected though was Garp's reaction to this. Because Garp just gets it. He really does. Despite seeing him get angry about Dragon being a revolutionary in the little flashback with Kuzan, Garp completely understands why Dragon hates the Navy, hates him, and needs to leave. There is no deep resentment from him. It's also very metal to see Garp give Dragon the key, knowing what might happen going forward. If you really think about it, in a weird way, Garp indirectly created the Revolutionary Army, and I absolutely love that fact. Dragon, a naive teenager whose whole life is changing in a matter of days, is reacting with a feverish level of anger, as he should, by the way. The dude almost died, like, what, 5 times because of the Navy's silly goal of defending the Celestial Dragons and making sure all the civilians get killed. It's not exactly justice, and I can only imagine that Dragon is a character with just as strong, if not even stronger, sense of justice than his father. As you know, people are of course reflections of their parents, and I cannot see a world where Mr. Justice himself, Garp, has a kid and doesn't instill that into him very deeply. So Dragon was absolutely, definitely molded heavily by Garp, even if it was just watching him. And here we get to see the moment that Garp realizes that his son is arguably more of a hero than he will ever be. That's why he lets him go. That's why he doesn't argue whatsoever. He knows that Dragon is right, but he's missing a lot of the details. Dragon doesn't know about Saturn or Emu or all the stuff with Xebec and Roger. He just saw the Holy Knights and knew something was wrong here when they were hunting innocent people. It's really fascinating, honestly, to think that Dragon needed one catalyst to spark a whole revolution. Meanwhile, Garp saw so many atrocities and still rallies with the Navy, even if it is kind of to protect people from within. But at least it does seem now like eventually, in the years leading up to Luffy's birth and everything, Dragon may have now gotten the full story. At least I know that Dragon and Garp reconnected, since we know adult Dragon and Garp do have some sort of relationship or contact. I think it gets ignored or forgotten a lot, but during Water 7, when Garp confronts Luffy and explains that his dad is Dragon, Garp says that he spoke to Dragon directly recently. It's right here in black and white in chapter 432. We even see Garp catch himself and go, maybe I've said a little bit too much here, whoops. I actually recently reread a lot of this stuff when God Valley showed Young Dragon, and it really made me realize that he and his dad have a super complicated but deep relationship, and now we've finally seen where that stems from. And I'm so excited to see where Oda's taking things with Garp and Dragon. I mean, we've seen their sad split, but we do know that they somehow then stayed in touch, so what else have they shared? What do both of these characters really know about the truth of the world and everything? I mean, I've obviously talked about this in previous videos before, but I personally really would like the idea that Garp and Dragon are still to a certain degree working together, or at least exchanging informations. I mean, when you really think about it, you have Garp, who clearly has now twice stated that he wants to protect people within the Marines and kind of, use the good side of the Marines and change the system from within to help the population and the innocent people of the world, while Dragon is the much more direct, take down Emu and the Celestial Dragons. Wouldn't it make sense that these two parties are working together? And wouldn't it be awesome if Dragon and Garp had some sort of shared plan, or at least, we're sharing info and intel? That would not only make sense, but be a really cool development within their relationship. It's also kind of interesting to see how they have such different approaches to Luffy. I mean, very clearly Dragon entrusted his father Garp with his son Luffy, so that kind of speaks for a certain amount of trust being, still there in their relationship. And also, Dragon kind of was very hands-off, let Luffy do whatever he wants to do. He's also not dissatisfied with Luffy being a pirate, kind of just making sure he doesn't die and protecting him from the sidelines, whether it was himself in Loketown or with Kuma, you know, keeping an eye on Luffy. Garp obviously just wanted Luffy to become a Marine again, and I wonder if Dragon would have just been okay with that and being like, hey, Luffy needs to pick his own path. If it is to be a Marine, then it is to be a Marine. And again, if he entrusts his son to Garp, that's something he probably kind of would have needed to expect. I mean, right now, Garp is in a bit of a pickle, being captured by Blackbeard, and we do know that Blackbeard and the Revolutionaries have a very weird connection too, where they're kind of like the Blackbeard pirates keep an eye on the Revolutionaries and kind of like basing their moves on whatever they do. And of course, they attacked Baltigo and drove Dragon out of there. I don't know, there's like some weird stuff going on there. So maybe Dragon might actually go and help out Garp potentially. That could be a thing. I really just want to see all three of the monkeys again on screen together. That's really what I would be most excited about. But something that I arguably just found as interesting maybe is that before this little father-son moment, Garp actually confronts Sengoku also about their different philosophies. Again, I think at this point it's very clear that Garp wants to do more. Sengoku pretty much tells him there is no use in yelling from the bottom of the cliff here, implying that the only way that Garp could fix the broken system was to climb higher. But Garp saw Saturn, Emu, Satimu, or whatever that thing was, and knew that it was too broken at the top to fix it from there. Also, I just find it incredibly funny that Garp is the hero of God Valley because the world government just straight up bribed Big News Morgan to run that story. Actually wouldn't be surprised if Emu themselves literally punished Garp by having this headline pushed through. Obviously, that's the perfect way to get back at him for punching a few holes in them. But you can still ask the question why Garp's even allowed to still be there. But yeah, making him the hero of an incident that he hated more than anything. It's really cool to see how God Valley also seemingly shaped Sengoku a little bit into a character that he is now, right? But it was a little bit alarming to see Sengoku say he'd just ignore the world government's bad stuff so casually as well. Did you feel that way too? Like, we know that Sengoku climbed up to Fleet Admiral, but then realized much later that he couldn't fix the world government after Marineford. And I think it also really adds some new context to Sengoku holding Garp back after Ace's death, because Sengoku knows that Garp is very much ready to throw it all away at this point. Garp has seen way too much to care about Akainu or the world government at that point, and what's also cool is seeing Garp tell Sengoku that he would take him out immediately if he ever became like any of the top brass, basically becoming corrupt and power hungry. Which we actually know he almost does with all of the Ohara and Marineford stuff, so thank goodness he stepped down from Fleet Admiral, because I'm pretty certain that Garp would have decimated him like he promised. Since in chapter 1166, broken and beaten down Garp almost whooped a fully healthy Sengoku. I mean, Sengoku's stocks are a little bit shaky right now, I won't lie, but then again, Garp is way more broken than we all ever thought, thanks to this flashback as well. Anyway, I feel like this is already way enough Monkey Clan stuff for one day. I've been like getting into that way too much recently. Apologies, passion topic. I'll be back to revisit this plot thread for sure at some point, but for now, I want to talk about how many legends were really created because of this one incident. Like, we already kind of knew a little bit about this, but this chapter specifically really put into perspective a lot as we saw God Valley fall, that Garp, Roger, Dragon, Kuma, Shanks, Shamrock, Whitebeard, Big Mom, Kaido, all of these people went on to completely change the entire world, and for all of them, it started right here. Now, what really highlighted that for me was seeing all the individual panels of the Rocks crew disbanding and seeing how the world reacted to it. It was half relief, half terror, since all those pirates were now leading their own insane crews. The same crews, of course, that then would go on to challenge and help Luffy on his journey, ironically enough. And of course, we also finally get to see the official panel of baby Shanks being found by Roger. I'll admit, watching people react and say that this is a retcon panel because Roger doesn't have his mustache, it's cracking me up a little bit, but I kind of get it. There's a lot of weird confusion because of Volume 4 Billion and Film Red that I very quickly wanted to clear up. There is a fan-made panel depicting the scene where Shanks is found in the treasure chest by Roger's crew, and it's based on a sketch of this moment that was in Volume 4 Billion, you know, the promotional small manga released alongside Film Red. It's also based on a specific shot from Film Red where Shanks sees Uta in the treasure chest and has a little bit of a flashback POV shot of him seeing Rayleigh and Roger from the chest. But that's in the movie, so it's of course not canon and can easily be written off as Shanks seeing Roger in his memory, the way that he always saw him as a kid, which was with his mustache. So to me, that's not really a big problem. I think, again, the movies are not directly made by Oda. They're not canon material, and this was more meant to be like a hint at things anyways. And I also feel like there's a bit of a risk in the One Piece community overall that I have fallen prey to a lot, where it's very easy to take certain fan ideas or really good theories or headcanon as fact when it's not actually. Happens to me all the time, but I think we all gotta be a little bit careful with that. Also, in general, I think, wouldn't it be insane if instead of animating this week by week God Valley, if they actually turned this into a real movie, a proper movie, then they can fix that too. Like, just imagine if, with the new anime schedule where they went 3 months break, 3 months anime, 3 months break, instead of doing 3 months anime, we actually get one movie, feature-length film, like 90 minutes, the entire God Valley incident. That would be the best thing ever. Like, that's something I would genuinely like to see and something I don't quite understand why that's not happening more often. There is so much stuff that you could technically do for the movies, canon material that fans would love to see, and we always get these original stories, which sometimes are really fun, sometimes aren't that great. I don't know, I feel like One Piece movies have infinite potential, something like film God Valley or something, Film Rocks. How hard would that go? And we have so many other animes that have been doing that, whether it's the new Chainsaw Man one or, Demon Slayer, of course. Just do it. Just create some really broken, really cool, badass cinema movies. How awesome would that be? Long story short, no, for me, Oda didn't retcon Roger's mustache. It's just that people thought that this fan remake was so accurate that it was real and are probably remembering the shot from Film Red and applying it as canon when it actually wasn't. But don't get it wrong, I'm pretty sure Oda didn't know if Roger did or did not have his beautiful mustache when he first sketched it up either. I kind of think it's kind of cool that he doesn't have it here, makes him look a lot younger, but I still dig the mustache, or technically it's nose hair. Actually, I've kind of been aware that Roger didn't have a mustache because I literally just talked to this guy on my podcast, Drink Sake. That's right. I teamed up with the Rogersbase, Roger, who came to Japan, to have a really in-depth conversation about pretty much everything. God Valley, villains, and much more over there. So if you want to hear over 2 hours of insane theory craft and just hyping out about One Piece, you can check it out with the link below, but after you finish this video, please. All right, with that little aside though cleared up, let's delve into the biggest part of this chapter, quite literally, which is, of course, Harald. The king of Elbaf clearly took the news of Xebec's death somewhat badly because he beat a giant in one of the most ruthless and tear-jerking moments I have ever seen in One Piece. Like, this panel to me makes it very clear just how insanely terrifying Harald was during his prime. All that rage and pain of losing his best friend, all taking out on that rampaging giant who was robbing some humans. But obviously the most emotionally moving moment was Harald ripping his horns off. Like, seriously, this panel will probably go down as one of the most brutal and iconic panels in the show. It's very poetic, honestly. We have known that Harald at some point ripped off his horns to show his resolve for peace, but actually seeing this moment now, it is very moving in like a weird way, and for all the wrong reasons, really, because let's face it, Harald, you're dooming your entire country in this very moment, pleading to the world government. It's just so tough to watch Oda write a character who clearly is just trying to do the right thing, trying to be a good person and help his people, but is blinded by his ideals. Very Sanji-esque of him, I would say. Not able to see that the future he's trying to create is the one that will inevitably ruin his own country. It's actually crazy to see him so emotional at his personal failures, how he thinks that he caused Xebec's death and how his goals are what caused it. And somehow, though, Harald still doubles down on his own ideology. And I mean, I'm not saying that his goals for a more peaceful nation of Elbaf are bad at all. Quite the opposite. It kind of seemed like Xebec wanted Harald to lead them as Nika. He pretty much says that to Loki in chapter 1166, saying that if there's anyone that could have become the next Nika, it would have been Harald. I think he really pretty much spelled it all out here. He wanted Harald to lead the giants and raise the Galela to liberate the world from Emu. But God, it's just so frustrating watching Harald continue down a path of accidental evil because he doesn't know that it's evil. Emu's face in this interaction pretty much says it all. Harald says, "I'll do whatever it takes to atone for Elbaf's sins, even if it means becoming a slave to the government." And Emu's almost certainly gonna make exactly that happen. And it is just so heartbreaking to watch a man who aims for liberation at his core give up his own freedom for the sake of his country, ignoring the fact that he's by doing so dooming Elbaf in the process. Like, dude, did Xebec not make it clear? Did God Valley not make it clear to you? I don't know, maybe Harald didn't realize what actually happened there, at least with the Saturn and Emu stuff, but man, I still think that sending your best friend into this entire thing is a major problem. And then siding afterwards with the government? Come on, Harald. The world government is so clearly evil, and seeing as we know that Harald's eventually gonna get slain by the Giants of Elbaf, presumably because of his deal with Emu and the Gorosei, it's pretty clear now that the rest of the flashback is gonna go downhill really fast from here. And I gotta say, I'm here for it 100%, even if it's gonna be absolutely gut-wrenching. I do need to see Harald fall now. Not out of anger or spite or anything, but because I know that that moment will be so unbelievably important and central for Loki and Hydrogen's future. Once we get out of this flashback, Harald's death is gonna be something that drives Loki to do some absolutely crazy stuff in the world. I'm absolutely certain of it, especially if Loki does confront that emu-possessed Gunko that's destroying the Atom Tree. But what I'm really left wondering about is why Harald really is going through with all of this, right? I really can't wrap my head around it. What's going on in his brain? Like, why is he so certain that joining the world government is the right way to achieve peace? I've actually really never thought about this point until right now in this chapter, but I actually don't get how Xebec thought Harald out of all people could be Nika. Harald is maybe the most anti-Nika person I have ever seen. He's anti-destruction, he's anti-liberation, he's hellbent on making Elbaf a nation that bends the knee to Emu and the Gorosei and the government. For what, really? I mean, I know we saw him have that interaction with Ida, and, you know, that kind of made him realize that the Giants overall have a bad rep, but like, why do this complete 180 like that? I wondered if there's something more to his story here we haven't seen. I mean, Harald is giving some pretty big anti-God sentiments. It's very clear that the Elbafians view Nika in both good and bad lights, right? So maybe Harald is a very anti-Nika kind of guy, but again, it feels weird that Loki and the other warriors under Harald, like Dorian Buggy, would then have such a good view of the sun god instead, especially if Harald didn't. So maybe Harald, being king of Elbaf, has access to some lore that the other giants don't have, you know, kind of like how Neptune knew about the Poseidon thing, and, you know, Cobra and stuff knew about the poneglyph being in Alabasta. I wonder if, being king of Elbaf, he has access to some knowledge or some artifact or some document that the other giants don't know about that actually maybe tell the story of how Nika once destroyed the world, or how Joy Boy destroyed the world and the government technically saved it. Like, that would kind of explain that a little bit, and that would be something I would really like to see. Harald having this piece of terrible knowledge, maybe something like Vegapunk knew, where he's like, yeah, we can't bring back another Nika or another Joy Boy. It's gonna destroy everything. But I think that the most full circle moment I can talk about in this sort of really big discussion about the end of God Valley is literally how the island was destroyed. It did not vanish. It was not erased, right? At best, it was like Buster called and then sank below the waves. Like, never to be seen again, unless of course it became Thriller Bark later on, which totally could still be the case, but yeah, alas, no. It is at the bottom of the ocean. At least it's not alone down there, because the entire ancient kingdom is also down there. Let's not forget, 200 meters or so below sea level lies the greatest nation in One Piece history, the legendary Great Ancient Kingdom, and its secrets are lost to time itself at this point. Or at least, that's what I would say if Vegapunk didn't exist. Remember the very big message, the one that's happening in the anime? There's a ton of stuff there that I think we need to really look back on now with Elbaf, because it's literally one of the biggest lore drops in all of One Piece history. Surely we can dig through it a little bit more, right? So if you want, check out this video. It's almost an hour, where I really break down everything that's in this message and uncover all the secrets that might be lying in it. So click right here if you want to check that out. Otherwise, thanks so much for watching. This was a really long chapter review, but it was a very climactic chapter. And thanks to all of our Patreons. Really appreciate all of you. You make a great difference for the channel. And I will see you on Tuesday in a very special new format I want to try.